Brazil's pollsters got it wrong, very wrong. Not only did far-right incumbent Jair Bolsonaro rob left-wing predecessor Lula Ignacio Da Silva of a first-round knockout, he can also boast upset wins for key allies in gubernatorial and congressional races. Next up, the October 30th presidential runoff, where Lula still boasts a sizable 5-point lead, but where the momentum undoubtedly is with his rival. It's a whole new race. Yes, the faces are familiar, but since Lula's heyday, when this emerging giant roared and commodity exports boomed, Brazil's been battered by corruption, COVID, and culture wars, amplified by social media. Bolsonaro taking a leaf out of the Trump playbook by methodically laying the groundwork for confrontation, particularly with unsubstantiated allegations of voter fraud. Could Brazil experience its own January 6th moment? We'll put it to the panel. How will the America's second largest democracy handle the result, whoever is the winner? And what's next for a nation and a continent bitterly divided over issues like the economy, minority rights, religion, the role of the military, and the future of the Amazon rainforest? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking ahead to Brazil's presidential runoff. With us, economist Cristina Terra, professor at the ESSEC Business School here in Paris. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We can thank Jair Bolsonaro and Lula for getting Tatiana Reiter, our former colleague, to darken the door of our studios. Thanks for being with us. You're now a policy consultant.
It's great to be back here.
Great to see you. Great to see you again as well. Felipe Galvan, your award-winning documentary, Encantado, chronicled the political turmoil of recent years, seen through the lens of the working-class neighborhood of Rio, where you were born and grew up.
That's it.
All right, then. And you're working on a sequel.
A sequel of it.
All right. From Lisbon, good to see attorney Fernando Santiago. Thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Francois. It's a great pleasure to see you again.
The France 24 debate, where you can always join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, #F24debate. The front page of Belo Horizonte newspaper Estado de Minas says it all with its headline, "A Divided Country." And there you see the map split, the parts in red voting for the Workers' Party of Lula, and the parts in green for Bolsonaro's party. And the map there proves it. Solange Mougin has more.
Hands held high in the shape of the letter L and chanting their former president's name, there was much love in the streets of Sao Paulo for Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva. The favorite in Brazil's presidential elections, Lula's hopes of winning in a single round were dashed Sunday night, paving the way for a runoff with President Jair Bolsonaro. But Lula rallied his supporters, saying victory on October 30th for the second round would be theirs.
I've always believed that we would win these elections. And what I can tell you is that we are going to win these elections. This is just extra time for us.
As ballots were being tallied, Brazil's electoral court announced that Lula had won over 48% of Sunday's vote, to Bolsonaro's 43%. 9 other candidates had also been in the running. But the close tie between the two men came as a surprise. Surveys had predicted that Lula would have a commanding lead. For President Bolsonaro, the tight difference is proof that his controversial presidency has been a success, and that surveys are not to be trusted.
Polls have been discredited. There will be this second round. The armed forces have taken part, provided transparency for these elections. But just like anywhere in the world, our system is not completely shielded. There's always the possibility for something to happen in a fully digital system.
Bolsonaro has been highly critical of Brazil's electronic voting system. And analysts fear that if he loses on October 30th, he could reject the results as fraudulent. For now, though, both he and Lula are gearing up for an intense runoff campaign.
Felipe Galvan, what was your reaction when you saw that? Because the polls said, Lula might score a first-round knockout. What was your reaction when you saw the results?
I was not surprised, really surprised. Having lived and filmed and shot all this process that took us here, I believed all the time that there was something magical, of this belief that Lula would come back like 20 years ago, and everything would be fine, and everything would be like it used to be. And I thought that Bolsonaro was part of this acceleration of history, like he was a symptom of something that is very profound and deep in the social way in Brazil. That is to say that in the working class neighborhoods like mine, there was a process of radicalization, and it not only the evangelism movement, but also the discontentment with the democracy, the disenchantment with democracy.
Because we've been told, all right, the evangelist vote wasn't necessarily going to go to one candidate or the other. And we were also told that those people in working classes, the way it's sold here in France at least, that, they benefited a lot when the Workers' Party were in power. Of course, they're all going to vote for Lula.
No, that's it. It's not magical. It's not just simple as that. It was violence. It was a lot of other issues that the left in power did not saw it coming, did not treat it well, I think. So Bolsonaro, it's the result of this rage, of this discontentment that I think we underestimated this process. And now with the results, we see that it's way more difficult to overcome this movement that we...
So we invite on an economics professor, but what you're hearing there from Felipe Galvão is that it's issues like crime that resonate more.
Crime, and also I think there is a resentment of the poor people with the left, because of course the very poor, they benefit from Bolsa Familia, from these income transfer programs that were put in place by Lula about 20 years ago, that were very effective to getting out of extreme poverty a high fraction of the Brazilian population. So that was very efficient. And there was another part of the population who ascended to a sort of middle class. And for those who are poor, but not that poor to get the income transfer, but not as rich to be out of the risk of poverty, for those, they resent the fact that the poor people, they get something, and them who work a lot, they don't get anything. So I think that's part of the story from the economic side. And of course, the rise in criminality, the rise in inequality over the past years. Inequality had been decreasing in Brazil since 1996 until 2015. And then with the deep recession in 2015-16, inequality started increasing again. And in 2018, we were at the same level as in 2008. Like we lost 10 years of gaining inequality. And actually the big crisis that we had in 15-16 was the product of the Labour Party government of Dilma Rousseff, who was the successor of Lula. So they had mixed feelings regarding Lula.
Mixed feelings regarding Lula. What are your thoughts, Tatiana Reiter, when you see a 76-year-old man against a 67-year-old man in the runoff?
Well, it makes me think that the debates, this election hasn't really respected a lot of what Brazilian people need, which is to know about policies. And I think I would disagree with the fact that now it's about crime. I think it was about crime, it was about violence in 2018, it was about corruption. This time, it was just absolutely polarized. I don't think we learned anything from the debates that we had with all the candidates. It was just really...
Okay, I'll put the question to you differently then. Why did the polls get it so wrong?
Because there's a lot of what they have been called shame voters who don't disclose who they're going to be voting for. And once they are up there, they select a lot of it was for Bolsonaro. A huge number of people are afraid nowadays of disclosing their political preferences, because we saw highs in crime. 3 people actually were murdered just for showcasing their political preferences just before this election. So the political hatred has really increased, and that's why we can't really trust the polls anymore. We can't really trust what people are saying.
Can't really trust what people are saying. What we can look, and what is fact, is the ballots that were counted. Political scientists, if you look at those polls in the days leading up to the vote, pointed to a late dip by the minor candidates. Now, they didn't get as many votes, obviously, something like 9% all told, but those 9% are sure going to matter going into the second round. And there you see this is a poll of polls compiled by a think tank here, the Council of the Americas. It shows the moderate former governor and minister Ciro Gomez and the center-right senator Simone Tebet fading. She finished on 4% to Gomez's 3%. And so those are the votes that are going to matter going into the second round. Fernando Santiago, we're kind of talking as though Lula's already lost the election, but of course he's got a 5-point lead.
Yes, Francois, actually he's leading, but less than the polls showed, as you mentioned yourself. I think Lula has always been a sort of a myth within Brazilian politics, but it is a myth that it's coming, back from the height where he was before. And as a matter of fact, the second election now, because the second term, it is a second election, totally different from the first one. And the odds are all over the table again. It's pretty hard to make a real guess of who's going to come up, but I can say that the right took over the parliament, the right took over the Congress, the Senate, the deputy chambers, and most of the states are also turned into the right side. So if Bolsonaro wins, he's going to have a good ride in front of him. But if Lula happens to win, it's going to be a hard time because it's going to be very difficult for him to govern the country.
It's going to be difficult for him to govern the country. And for you, what was the issue that mattered most? Because we're seeing people complaining about the corruption of the Lula years, but also, on the other hand, people complaining about Bolsonaro bending the institutions and using the military, for instance.
Yeah, indeed. Well, they have very different personalities. What I can say about Lula, it's almost unanimous. Everybody's mad about corruption, of all the scandals that have during his government and leftist government in Brazil. Bolsonaro is just a wild person. I mean, he doesn't really contain what he says, and I think he would gain a lot to be a lot more quiet, but it's not his style.
For months, Bolsonaro had refused to say whether he would accept defeat if it came, constantly questioning the legitimacy of Brazil's electronic voting. You heard in that clip where he seemed to say that it was the armed forces somehow, after a good night on Sunday, that had guaranteed transparency. But even Sunday night, after he had outperformed his supporters in Brasilia on their guard.
We believe that this vote count needs to be monitored very closely. We are waiting with high expectations for Bolsonaro to be elected.
I think there is fraud because there have been so many demonstrations in support of Bolsonaro. So many people demonstrate every day. And Ciro Gomez with so few votes. Simone Tebet with so little. To me, it makes no sense that Lula is ahead and Bolsonaro is behind.
So, Cristina Terra, what happens on October 30th if Bolsonaro doesn't win?
Wow. Let's see. Let's pray for nothing very bad to happen. What is for sure is that if there is not a large margin in favor of Lula, if Lula wins, we might have problems because Bolsonaro has been saying that there will be fraud in the elections since he got elected 4 years ago. So he's just, announcing in a way that he will. Actually, he said that he will accept to get out of the presidency if he is elected in fair elections.
Has Donald Trump sort of shown the way, and this is what all populist leaders will do henceforth? When you come into office, already start saying that there's fraud?
Clearly, Bolsonaro follows the lead of Trump. Bolsonaro has been elected as a congressperson since, for 27 years before being elected president, and he never complained about the electronic voting system that we have in Brazil. So it's very weird that now he starts saying that things will not go his way. There will be certainly the result of fraud.
And again, I'm haunted by that line we heard in that report at the outset, that the armed forces somehow guaranteed the transparency on Sunday. What role for the armed forces?
So that's something that Bolsonaro brought back. Actually, I think it's very sad that we have in the runoff for the second term 2 candidates that are more, backward-looking than forward-looking, because we have Bolsonaro that has the dream of the dictatorship, as though it was a good period for Brazil, because it so happened that during the dictatorship, Brazil was growing very fast. But at the same time, inequalities were also increasing, at least not decreasing. So they have that speech that they would make the cake grow, and then they would divide later on. But the dividing never came. The dividing only came with Lula in the beginning of the year 2000. And Lula also, if he is elected, he's going to find a country that is very different from the country he found when he was first elected in 2002. In 2002, Brazil had a stable domestic situation, although he said that he received a cursed heritage from his predecessor, but that was not true. The public finance, they were in order, inflation was under control, and in the international scenario, you had the world growing, commodity prices increasing. Whereas nowadays, the next government will have a cursed inheritance because Bolsonaro has increased expenses, and we expect a deterioration of the budget of the order of 4.2% of the GDP for next year. So it will be a very different scenario from what he got 20 years ago. So he'll have to, work much more to get things done. The situation is not so rosy as it was before.
Yeah, and as Fernando Santiago was saying, it's not just a presidential election that's taking place. There are key races in Congress for governor, for instance, in Sao Paulo. That's the most populous state. Bolsonaro's former infrastructure minister, Tarcísio de Freitas, taking 42.6% of the vote to 35.5% for the man who was the standard bearer for the Workers' Party in the last presidential election, Fernando Haddad. And everybody thought that Haddad was going to sail through in Sao Paulo. What happened there?
I think they got it all wrong. For me, I voted for Lula. For me, there's no problem. The first time I voted in my life, it was in 2002. I'm part of this Lula generation, if you want. I came from the popular background, from a working class neighborhood, and I was the first of my family to be able to study abroad in France. But when I came to France, I saw something happen in Brazil. And now I think that this Brazil is dead.
Is dead?
Is dead. Some Brazil is dead. And we Brazilians have to mourn this country. We have to mourn to understand what Bolsonaro represents, what Bolsonaro unveiled from what we are. I think that Bolsonaro represents this project of Brazil that is not supposed to be a country, a nation, but actually a big farm to feed the world. And I think that we cannot make a country out of this project. And you can make a great place to produce and with constant social war and constant civil war.
Are you saying that, because we know it's well chronicled, Bolsonaro's links with the business industry. Are you saying that's his design, or that's the vision he's actually selling to Brazilians?
This is this vision that he's selling to Brazilians, but I think that he just embodies a project that is in the foundations of Brazil in itself. I think Brazil was not at the basis. When I say this, it's very hard to me, But that's for me the lesson from the first 4 Bolsonaro years, because I'm not sure that Lula will win this. It's very complicated because, as you said, if he wins, he will take an ungovernable country. This margin of victory it's not good. The Bolsonaro supporters are radicalized, armed for a lot of them, and I think that we are going to a very difficult situation. It's not all the people who I have this how do I say this detail. I think that there are details in the Bolsonaro spectrum of voters that we have to count. It's not all people that are radicalized and brutal, but people that have a really profound desire of rupture.
Fernando Santiago, I see you shaking your head, but there has been an embrace of a gun culture under Jair Bolsonaro that's been noticed by the rest of the world.
Yeah, indeed, you're right. There has been, but it was in response of a lot of inaction that came out from the last governments. I mean, there was a feeling, and that there amongst the middle class and everybody, that the crimes that were going over into Brazil, they were never punished, and that people could not defend themselves. And we have many examples of that. I'm not saying that's good, that's wrong. I'm just relating a fact, and that you have many examples of criminals that just get away with everything and kill a family and go to jail, and they get a pension while they are in jail, while the family who has lost some family members, or the father or mother who raised their kids, they don't get anything from the state, and the criminal get it inside the jail. So there was kind of a feeling that the citizen could have the right to defend themselves. I assume that probably inspired by the United States model, but the thing is, we had to, the feeling that you need to empower the citizen a little bit more, and you need to give them the right to carry his gun, and that was the beginning of all this movement that you said. And
so the individual American style matters above all, you're saying. So you agree then with Felipe Galvão that the old Brazil is dead, and that Brazil now is aspiring towards something different?
Well, I agree with part of what Felipe says. It depends on what conception you have of old Brazil. For example, when you say that Bolsonaro is trying to make Brazil a farm of the world, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, the Brazil is a powerhouse in agriculture, and I don't say why we should take it out of Brazil. It's like we say Saudi Arabia, stop exporting oil. I mean, you're not an oil country anymore, and those are the facts. It's a real strength, and we are lucky that we have this agribusiness that is very powerful in Brazil. But that's not only it. I think you reduce Brazil's economy to agriculture, it's very reductive. We are far more than that. I mean, we have economists here with us, and I think they're more appropriate to talk than me about that. But the Brazil economy is very diversified. It's very strong in many.
Today, I don't think so.
fields.
I don't think so. It was to be diverse. You know better than me, but I think that we are only today. We have an industry that is demolished, and I don't see this diversification.
It's true that the share of industry has decreased in the Brazilian economy. One thing that we must think is that the Brazilian industry was developed mostly during the dictatorship period in the 50s, actually in the 60s and 70s. And it was based on lots of subsidies to parts of the industry. And most of the industry was survives thanks to subsidies. And without those subsidies, they cannot survive economic foreign competition. And the thing is, of course, there are some sectors that don't need that, but the approach of the previous governments to increase industry in Brazil, more specifically what the Labour Party did, of Dilma Rousseff and Lula as well, was to give subsidies to parts of the industry. And that creates inefficiency, and also it's a choice of where to put the resources, because if you put money to some parts of the industry, you're disprotecting the other part. You're creating an imbalance. And a much more desirable policy would be to create a kind of level playing field for everyone. Because the problem is it's very hard to do business in Brazil. There is these statistics from the World Bank called Doing Business, where they measure several statistics on how easy or not it is to do business in different parts of the world. And I would mention just one of those statistics, which is the number of hours of work that you need to pay taxes in different countries. Not for the value of the tax itself, but for the red tape of paying taxes. And Brazil is way ahead in the first place. It requires like over 2,000 hours of work per year just to know what to pay, to whom to pay.
And also, I think that illustrates that one of the biggest issues when it comes to the industry not going very well in Brazil is corruption, because we did have another big industry of oil, and unfortunately, it is where it is because of some corruption that went behind it. So
oil and the construction business, obviously, because we all remember the Odebrecht scandal, and which affected all of Latin America, by the way. Tatiana Reiter, your thoughts on all of this? Is this the crux of the? If again, I take the premise of Felipe Galvão that the old Brazil is dead. What does the new Brazil look like to you?
That's interesting, because I think the new Brazil reflects the new world as well. In terms of the United States, a lot of things have changed with social media. A lot of things have changed with fake news. What I hope for Brazil, more than president, is that we are able to have a better balance of power, because really the balance between legislative, judiciary, and executive is not really where it should be. The legislative has a lot more power now than when Lula was less elected, so that's another thing that he would have to deal with if he came to power. The judiciary as well, we have a Supreme Court that is extremely politicized, and that really decides who, perhaps not who goes to jail or not, but when they can be released or when they can go to jail, and that is a huge political player. So that's what I hope for mostly for democracies, to have a better balance of power.
And how's it going on that score?
Not very well at the moment, especially with the legislative. Well, it's going to be even more so now that we have more from the Bolsonaro party in the Senate asking for impeachment of the Supreme Court, but there needs to be more checks and balances imposed on the higher tribunals, but that would have to be also rearranging the entire constitution, so that's another debate there.
Yeah, we have also, a lot of people who've been elected who've made headlines in recent years. Felipe Galvão, I think most notably of the crusading investigating magistrate Sergio Moro, who then entered the cabinet of Bolsonaro as justice minister, and who was behind the arrest of the man who's still, for now, the front runner for that October 30th runoff.
How
He just got elected to the Senate, I believe, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy history. Brazilian history, recent history, is a crazy history, and we have a hard time to explain this, to make sense out of it. And Sergio Moro, for example, as you said, was the man behind the big anti-corruption operation, Lava Jato car wash operation that I don't think that it came out to be good for the country. It revealed, the expansion, the profoundness of our problem with corruption, and the state of Brazil, like as it was conceived, is conceived based on corruption, I think, because it was always something that it was not clear if it's private or public. The very notion of public thing, it's not clear in Brazil. What is public and what is private, for example.
And Jair Bolsonaro, by the way, wants to privatize the country's biggest asset, which is Petrobras, the state oil company.
That's why he is in tune with the zeitgeist, not only the zeitgeist, but the
spirit of Brazil.
The spirit of Brazil, exactly. The spirit of Brazil, Bolsonaro embodies more than we thought. And that's so hard to for my generation, that we didn't knew this dictatorship Brazil, for example.
Fernando Santiago, Sergio Moro was caught on tape expressing his political vindictiveness against Lula. It's one of the reasons Lula got out of jail, in fact, in the end, and the charges were dropped. Is it a good thing that he's now elected as senator?
Well, I think we represents a part of Brazil that wants to fight against corruption. I just want to correct something about what you said, François. That actually the Lula's charges were not dropped. It was a problem of jurisdiction. So the proofs are still there, but it's going to start a new procedure. It's going to be a new one. But he was never declared innocent. I mean, he was never free of charge. They were not dropped at all. That's the problem with him. That's what brings the whole rejection that he has amongst a lot of people. But
when you hear Tatiana Reiter expressing concern over the independence of the judiciary, over the fact that Jair Bolsonaro has the Supreme Court in his crosshairs, do you share those concerns?
Yes, especially as a lawyer, I share the concerns of an independent judiciary system. But one thing that she also says that's true, that the Brazilian higher court, I mean, seems to have crossed the few lines which their predecessors did not. So somehow it's a question of trying to rearrange this balance between all the powers. But indeed, it's a real concern, of course. But I'm a very optimist person, and I really believe in the strengthness of Brazilian institutions, especially. And that point, I agree with Felipe. Brazilian's recent history is like a movie, like the movies he makes. Actually, he's a good person to say that. It's like a movie. You can't believe that is really happening. It's very highs and lows and ups and everything, but it's still within a very clear frame of democracy. Brazil's institutions, they are strong. I mean, when Bolsonaro says, the army and something like that, and then that, etc., the army in itself, they are quiet. I mean, they are orderly people that respect what the voters says. That has always been like that since the end of dictatorship, like 85 or 86.
Of course, it hasn't always been the same for certain minorities. I'm thinking most notably people in the Amazon who have been the target of killings in some instances, activists who wanted to protect their lands from deforestation and agriculture. When you, Christina Terra, this is, I guess, the issue that French people must ask you about a lot, the Amazon and the environment issue, and just how much of it's been bulldozed by successive governments, but in particular in the last 4 years.
No, actually, there had been in the past a lot of progress in protecting the forest, but this has been undone by the recent government. There was this famous or infamous ministerial meeting in 2020, so in the beginning of Bolsonaro's term, in which you hear the Ministry of that should be protecting the environment, the Ministry of Environment, saying that they should take advantage of the COVID pandemics, that people wouldn't be paying attention, to change all the rules and regulations and to soften the rules to be able to use the forest for agriculture and for other uses. So that's very scary, and the amount of deforestation has increased a lot. I mean, that's what the statistics says since Bolsonaro years. Because also they decreased the surveillance and the punishment policies for those who are caught.
Illegal logging and this kind of thing.
Exactly.
We're apparently reaching some kind of tipping point for the Amazon, and that this election matters for the whole planet, you say?
It does, and for the previous election in the United States, it was the first time that Brazil was ever mentioned in a debate for the U.S. When they talked about the Amazon. There needs to be something done, clearly, but what also needs to be taken into account seriously is the agribusiness and how to preserve also a sector that is healthy that provides work for a lot of people. So the protection of the environment needs to be planned by someone who also has that into perspective.
Philippe Galvon?
I begin to,
is there room for everyone? Can you have a thriving agriculture and preserve the rainforest?
That's our defy. It says we have to do this. It's the only way. And then in this sense, I think that Brazil is a good place. It's in a good place a good position to show the world what to do, because we have all this area. Yeah, at the same time, this potential of feed the world, and when I say that the project of Brazil is to predate nature, to make money, to make resources out of it. I think that it's a vision of Brazil, but there is another vision of Brazil. There's another vision of Brazil that there's a lot of people that have this vision, and I think that Bolsonaro years, if I can say like that, show us that a new vision of Brazil has to be put in place. And I think that Amazon it's very visual. When we saw it, all this forest burning, it's like Brazil is burning. Some idea of Brazil has to be burned. I think. Sorry for the images, but in order to build another country, because this country it has not worked,
Christina Terra?
Yeah, I just would like to say I'm certain that we can still be feeding the world without burning the Amazon. The agribusiness is the sector of Brazil that has had the highest increase in productivity over the past years. So there has been research that developed new kinds of seeds and new way of planting, and that increased a lot productivity. So we could just go in that direction. We don't need, because burning the Amazon is actually killing the agribusiness in Brazil, because that will change all the climate. And so it's a very short-term vision to burn the Amazon. If we want to be productive in the long run, you have to preserve the Amazon and invest in other other ways to increase productivity, as we did in the past.
Earlier, Tatiana Ryder, you mentioned the violence we've seen on the campaign trail, targeting candidates, sometimes targeting, you said, ordinary citizens just for expressing their point of view. It's extremely polarized. It's also extremely polarized in a lot of our other countries. We have the U.S. Secretary of State visiting Colombia now, which has a new left-wing president. Pendulum swing in Latin America. This election in Brazil, what signal will it send to the likes of Colombia, but also Peru, Argentina, Chile?
Obviously, if Lula is elected, then relationships with these countries will get more fluid. Once you share an ideology, that's the way it goes. If Bolsonaro is elected, will it have a big impact? I'm not so sure that it will change much. It didn't. Everything he mentions about Venezuela and Cuba actually has an effect. It hasn't helped those countries prosper. It hasn't given them money, but does it change the way they think? And not really. So I'm a little skeptical about how much of an influence it can actually have in that area if Bolsonaro remains in power.
Fernando Santiago, what's the key issue now for the next 4 weeks?
Well, I think the people are going to decide which kind of Brazil they want, as Felipe said, and that means, do we want to build a new Brazil, or do we want a Brazil that's coming back to the Lula years with which was pretty marked by corruption and disintegration of the state, I mean. And a lot of people are in doubt about it. And I don't really believe that the center, people who voted for the smaller candidates, I'm not so sure they can bring their vote to whom they declare to be favorable to. A lot of people voted in one of these two candidates because they don't want it to be polarized. They don't want it. They would like to see a third way of running Brazil, but unfortunately, there's no third way still in this election, and things are going.
Felipe Galvão, do both candidates have a path to victory if they forge coalitions, or is it now too polarized for that?
I think there is no victory possible in a way.
For either?
Because there are a little margin. So we are stuck in...
I mean, these smaller candidates we talked about earlier, what they say won't matter.
Zero condition, I think, because they don't have a popular identification. They don't have a good speech with that connects with people, and don't have more than that a project that makes people believe that, like Fernando said, we're gonna do something different, a new Brazil, and this desire of rupture, desire of change, profound change. That's for me the key for the next year.
Just very briefly, Tatiana?
No, sorry, I was going to say that actually those candidates have much more of a project for Brazil than Lula and Bolsonaro, and they were the only ones who actually talked about it during the debates.
And they got 4% and 3% of the vote.
Exactly.
25% abstention rate this time around. That's high for a country where it's mandatory.
And I'm really wondering what the next one will be for the second round.
All right, Tatiana keeping her cards close to her chest. Many thanks, Tatiana Ryder. I want to thank as well Fernando Santiago for being with us from Lisbon, Cristina Terra, Felipe Galvão. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.